Running back ranking conflicts, dynasty trading, and we have the Football Guys Shark Pool quotes from the week. And we got to start the Football Guys Dynasty show. I'm your host, Chad Parsons, with Jordan McNamara's Bills recap of their conference championship game, because I was kind of thinking, we have mutual friends where if you get eliminated along the way to the Super Bowl or in the Super Bowl, if you don't win the whole thing, one of my big questions is always, because I don't really have, I've dating back 20 years, I haven't had really a rooting interest. Is it more painful? Would you rather not go to the playoffs than be a few quarters away from the Super Bowl or a few quarters from winning the Super Bowl? What's kind of your Bills Mafia take, where it's been a long time coming to even get this far?
No, I was glad we got there, but I was pretty vocal about this, including in our staff chat. Like you get all the way there, and then you have just sheer cowardice, right? And like,
play to not win, play to lose, play not to lose against the greatest on the planet. Good luck.
Like you have to, and like, I don't know, for me, like you're a road dog. I don't know. It takes, I'm just of the belief that to beat Patrick Mahomes in Arrowhead in January, it's going to take a superhuman effort for probably the next 5 years. And if you're like not willing to put that forward and go for it on fourth down and not settle for field goals and not punt, right? And like all of those things that you have to do, like you got to hang 35 to beat him there. Like it's just going to be what it's going to take for a long time. And
so you mean
if you're not willing to do that,
so you mean closing the gap to 12 with a field goal is not really the way to do that?
No. Yeah. And it's and they did it twice. Like, I don't know. He came out and said, we couldn't settle for not getting any points in that situation. And I guess I get that, but I just totally don't, right? Like you can't, like, that's not going to win you the game, right? It's scoring a touchdown there can win you the game. And they did it a couple of times. I just, they got the big lead and then let it get away. And, so I was pretty disappointed in that. But I'll say I thought it was an interesting weekend because you also had the stuff in Green Bay where I actually initially at first glance, I thought that was a horrible call too. I went back and sort of looked at the math a little bit. I can actually justify why they kicked. And it honestly, it would have worked out. Like, I think they would have played it right if they could have gotten a stop, but they just couldn't get a stop. But like it actually would have worked out because they could win in regulation where if they scored a touchdown and got an extra point, and got a 2-point conversion, they weren't going to win in regulation. And they were probably going to force Brady into throwing the ball and potentially losing that way. Right. That it actually opened up the ability to win instead of like either tie or lose.
You pressurize the other team if you tie the game, and now they're going to be full throttle to get into winning range, and then you're just done. As opposed to, I was looking at it this way, that the Tampa's defense was playing well in general. And so how many times you going to get a crack and multiple cracks inside the 10-yard line? That was sort of my thinking of it, is how many times you think you're going to get down here, so that if you do score a touchdown now, and I thought the main thing was they misplayed second and third down. That was my big thing. But like you were thinking 2-3 down territory, not 4 down territory, like almost after that Adams drop. So it was interesting to me that they played it that way of like, oh yeah, we'll just get the ball back and then drive the field to get down here. And then, so that whole but the 2 possession thing, I think people lose sight of, where it's like you're down 8, 1 score, yay. And the other thing that struck me from the commentary, and I wanted your thoughts because it's Bills centric, was the whole, the Bills, this idea of, it's kind of the young player theory with prospects as well, of the Bills are improving. Oh, they'll be back. This whole they'll be back. They'll be back in like this game in Kansas City, and then they'll have this growth experience, and Josh Allen will be better, and the team will be better, and they'll win the game next time. And that really, that dialogue doesn't happen a lot, of just like, oh yeah, you have a great season, now upward trajectory, you lost, now you're going to go to the Super Bowl, and then you lose it, and then the next year you go to the Super Bowl and you win it. This whole like constant growth of these up and coming teams, that is a bit of a fallacy to me. And you get plenty of teams that drop back to just, they're okay. And I'll be interested to see, because I always thought the Bills were a little overrated on defense in sort of the perception, and I thought they were going to get skewered, and they kind of did.
Yeah, I thought the perception was overstating their defense, but I mean, like I think it's good growth to get there, and you'd rather get there than not. But you're going to be back. I mean, the best example of this that I can ever remember in all of sports is the 2012 Oklahoma City Thunder, and with three guys that ended up becoming MVPs of the league, went to the finals, and in their primes, like in their early 20s, they go to the finals and lose, and they're like, well, they'll be back, and they never went back. And so they'll take the next step. This team's going to win a championship, all those things. And they never got there again. And so like these things can be, you have to capitalize. And so like, it's nice that they got there. But like you will have to figure out a way to beat him there, right? You are going to have to beat Mahomes and Reed and Kelsey and Hill. You're going to have to beat him in Arrowhead in January. Like if you want to be good, like that's what it's going to take. It's going to kind of be like the Warriors were. Like you're going to have to beat them, and all those like Houston Rockets teams and stuff that got to Western Conference Finals and got deep into them, they just couldn't beat them. Like you have to be able to actually convert, and they couldn't, right? So maybe that's a learning experience, and they take something from that. But it doesn't. I left that game feeling disappointed for sure because I thought they could win.
All right. So we do a lot of agreement. We agree a lot, in sort of how we approach Dynasty, how we approach players, and generally how we view players. And that's a good thing because we co-GM a Dynasty team together. We've talked, actually two of them, and we talk about those. We have talked about them on the show in various forms. So that is a good quality. You want to disagree about many things, and especially some of the tenets you'll have about Dynasty player value, and then go into a situation where you're both in on a team and managing that together. But we're going to go over the next few weeks. We're going to pick specific players that within our rankings we disagree, and we're going to kind of pit out both sides. And I think that's an important process because if you're not constantly in environments of, you're on as a guest on other shows, or you're mixing up on Twitter regularly with dialogue of people that disagree with you or you disagree with them, then again, it's important to hear other sides or kind of poking holes in what you think or how you rank and value players. And we're going to do that with select players that we're decently far enough apart to have a dialogue about. And we're going to choose in this episode, Josh Jacobs. We've talked about him regularly. We talk about profiles. We talk about production. And here we are. Jordan up on Footballguys is running back 5. I am running back 11. So that's a decent spread when you think about the first 2 or 3 or 4 tiers of the position, where 5, I would imagine, Jordan, is probably tier 2 for you in some regard within tier 2. And he's tier 3/tier 4 for me. I have it gradiated a little more there. So give us the pro Josh Jacobs, and here's why I think he's worthy of being in the top 5 for Dynasty.
He's a first-round running back with 2 hits to open his career, which is an incredibly rare feat. So I will say in the tier in which I have him, I think it's a pretty long tier. So I could take basically, I think I would have like pretty confidently have Taylor over him. But then like you go to Dalvin Cook, Zeke, Swift, Akers, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That's we could make an argument in there basically about any of them. I think they're largely similar types of profiles. So that's really it. And I look at that and I say, of those guys, I mean, maybe Dalvin Cooks has more stability. We're not totally sure on where Akers is in terms of if he's the guide. Edwards-Helaire, what's the ceiling there? Swift, what's their offense going to look like, right? So there's questions. If you were to say, come back to me with, if you answer 6 or 7 questions that I have about running backs right now, and I were to get those answers, I might move Jacobs, right? But in terms of what I know right now, I feel pretty good about his profile, and I feel pretty good about projecting him going forward. Does maybe he have a little bit less of a range of outcomes than some of the other guys below him. Like, could I see Jacobs produce a top 3 finish, in a good year? Maybe not. Could I see that out of Swift? Yeah, right, because I think he has more receiving upside. But I think all told, I feel better about where Jacobs is and what I know about him as I sit here right now. So it's a lot about how I look at it, and I sort of look at these profiles. I mean, when you look at these profiles, I think that profile is an incredibly lucrative profile. So historically speaking, that's an elite profile. So that's my thought on Jacobs.
Yep. There you go. Elevator pitch for Josh Jacobs, way up there in the running back 5 or so range. And a lot of the guys you mentioned, and again, I have them relatively close in terms of the overall dynasty value there, where I think he loses some tiebreakers for me. And beyond the, Cook and Swift and Akers and Dobbins and Edwards-Helaire and Elliott is a lot of the things you alluded to, which is the ceiling kind of questions, does he really have a top 5 type season in him? And watching the Raiders every week and, every team, but I mean, for 2 years now, that Gruden got his workhorse, but it's an interesting iteration of the workhorse. Like Jacobs to me is I've actually been disappointed with what I've seen from him movement wise, athletically in the NFL, where you see some of his Alabama highlights and we'll go back. I mean, he didn't test well and people want to brush that under the rug. And I think we've seen that in the NFL. I mean, he is a determined runner. He's going to be one that doesn't shy away. But just his rate of big plays, the big plays he has produced have been very stunted. And for 2 years of sample size, of what he's done. And you're looking at it. I mean, he's got over 500, easily over 500 touches now, where that's a big enough sample to say we have a pretty good impression. It's not that for 3/4 of that he's been playing through injury. We have a good impression of who he is as a player. And the other, so I see you've got to score a bunch of touchdowns. This last year, he had 12 of them on the ground. So that's how you get there. And so for him, is that going to take 15 plus touchdowns? Is it going to take more big plays? I'm most skeptical of that. And then you say the expansion, where we thought by this point we'd be talking about a 60 catch guy. If you had said year 2, Josh Jacobs, 15 games played, give me the catches, you'd probably guess 50 plus. 60 plus. I mean, and the fact that we saw Devontae Booker rolling out there as the 2-minute guy or as the third down guy, they got Theo Riddick off the scrap heap of the NFL. Yeah, come on, Theo, catch some passes, get on in here. So I think we're going to keep tricking ourselves to some degree that, he's averaged, 8 yards a catch, 7 yards a catch. He has not been a dynamic player, and he has not been a dynamic player in space or in the passing game. So I think the Raiders in year 3 are not going to be a team that goes, all right, we're going to unleash him. Here we go. And all of a sudden you're going to see 2 to 3 screen passes for him or checkdowns a game in addition to regular receiving work. I just don't think we're going there. So you kind of need to see like high, meaning top 1 or 2 touchdowns at the position rushing wise, or you've got to, I mean, this is just a tough landscape for Jacobs in terms of realizing more upside than we've seen so far, which is sort of low end running back 1. And I don't mean to dismiss that and say floor is really important, that sort of week in, week out. And again, to almost talk about your points, I mean, rookie contract, he's locked in 2 more years. You have a 5th-year option, and his role, and his vice grip on that job isn't going away. But I mean, leveling off, and if he has a couple more running back 10 to 15 type seasons, I don't know if it helps as much as this valuation or the cost you would have to put on him in a startup draft would really move the needle. Is the equity to that. And so looking at these other guys, I mean, Cam Akers pretty much said, Darrell Henderson, go sit over there. Now, he hasn't done it to start a year, and he hasn't done it for more than a few weeks at a time. But you can see that, momentum building there for next year. J.K. Dobbins, it's pretty overt when you watch him play, the upside big play potential of not even the perfect storm, of just a good enough storm next year. Edwards-Helaire, I've actually liked, some of the things I've seen from him better than 2 years of Josh Jacobs. And Ezekiel Elliott, we know his profile. Dalvin Cook, we know his profile. DeAndre Swift, I think, is an absolute threat to be top 2 or 3 or 4 at the position for catches next year. And that is where you really move the needle PPR wise. So I'm just going to move all those other directions and say, I'm sure not all of them are going to beat Josh Jacobs straight up in points next season, but I think every single one of them has a higher ceiling potential over the next 1 to 2 seasons to have that year that really does move the needle. And what that's going to do to their value versus Jacobs, I think it would be rather pronounced.
Yeah. See, I just with Dobbins, I don't think that. I think Jacobs represents Dobbins' ceiling. Right, because I don't think that he's going to catch passes. And so
35 catches, can he score 10, 12, 15 touchdowns? Sort of the same sort of thing as what you're referencing.
Right. I mean, if he finishes his so I would just rather take what I have in hand with him, right? That's sort of where that's kind of where I get with those guys. So I actually have him off the back of the pack a little bit at the in terms of those rookie guys, but yeah, it's interesting. Like him and Edwards. So can
I ask you something? So let's take if you have a new NFL team, and we're not even naming it, so it could be any of the 32, and you're saying we're putting Jacobs and we're putting Dobbins into the same offense. What do you think happens over a big enough sample size?
I think
they're both the lead back.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I think it'd be. I think maybe Dobbins has a higher range of outcomes. But I mean, if it was me, I would scheme up some stuff for.
That's where we would both go. That's where we would both go. I mean, we both are saying he should have caught double the passes he did this year.
Right. Yeah.
I just don't know if that's going to happen. I mean, they found every reason not to, and it seems like his breaks are coming on the pivotal, optimized outside of the goal line. Optimized passing game situations, and that's when they're choosing to give him breaks. Because how many times, right? We watch the game, it's like he ends up with 18 touches, but one catch, and then thank goodness he scored a touchdown.
Right,
and that I mean, again, usage is king, and you'd love to see that. But what carries represent is that you're going to get more of them near the goal line because you just generally get more, and because you're getting more carries, you're going to get more receptions because you're getting more carries. And unfortunately, there's a disconnect there for him and the way they're using him, which I think at some point you need to find out.
Right. You know what's fascinating? I was doing some work on this over the weekend, and you want to guess who the best quarterback in football, not on plays that were not play action passes, were this year?
On not play action passes.
On non-play action passes.
Well, we know who didn't use a lot of play action. Josh Allen didn't use a lot of play action, so
he did not.
Because they don't even action it because they don't really. So that's not the answer, or that is the answer?
It's not the answer.
Okay. Non-play action.
Yeah.
I don't know. Tom Brady?
Derek Carr.
Wow.
You want to guess who was like the worst in football on play action? Derek Carr. So it's really interesting that just some of the efficiencies there, like that.
Raiders are running bizarro world.
Yeah, like that's a hashtag good quarterback, right? And it's interesting that he. I don't know. Maybe that's one of the efficiencies. He hasn't been thrown at the Jacobs. I'm not sure. So, but yeah, in terms of yards per attempt, he was the best in football from non-play action this year. So.
He's a pretty interesting quarterback this offseason, right?
He is.
It feels like he shouldn't be on the hot seat at all if you really sort of kind of study what he's been doing, and former basically MVP guy outside of the injury that one year when they started. Who was it at quarterback in the playoff game?
I can't remember.
I can't. Yeah, exactly. It was like his only start in the NFL. But anyway, some people consider him firmly on the hot seat and part of this quarterback carousel, and others, think that he shouldn't be at risk or at threat at all.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about some dynasty trading here. So these trades, and again, I think this really before NFL free agency and early on, especially when you have rookie picks involved and some of these more divisive veterans, this is really the peak time. We're going to get the My Fantasy League rollover here in a couple weeks, but this time frame is really interesting. I pulled up 2 Julio Jones ones, and then we have another one that's Saquon Barkley. So the first one is Superflex. We've got Julio Jones, and I think I'm talking. I mean, you are. To be really down on Julio Jones, but you're not one of those people of like the end is nigh, and and the best is he's never going to be a top 15 guy again, and all this type of stuff. Julio Jones for T.Y. Hilton, 212 and 306 in Superflex as mentioned.
212 and 306. Yeah, it's clearly Julio to me.
And the main thing I wanted, was the why.
Yeah, the why there is I think there's more left in the tank pretty clearly for T.Y. Hilton. When you get into 212, 306 range, that's nothing guaranteed. Not that there's anything guaranteed in this world, but that's like I don't know, a 20-30% shot over the next 4 years that you find someone that's helpful. And so, when I'm looking at Julio, right, like assuming that he's healthy, and I think, assuming that he continues to play, right, and healthy is a interesting word when you talk about Julio, but assuming he's on the field, he's going to outperform that cost, right? And so I don't know. I would rather, that's a much higher upside bet than any of those assets, even when you add them up on the other side.
Yeah, the thing for me is, Hilton had a nice bounce back, but I think in terms of being a difference maker, he's largely done. So,
and he's a free agent too, right? So,
Is he going to be well received at his age? With, again, he hasn't really shown it for 2 years, and so Julio Jones, you shouldn't be, if he plays this year, right? You would be like, oh yeah, top 15 to 20, and that's where it starts. You still wouldn't be surprised at his age. We're talking all-time player. So yes. I'm not saying you can get a first round for Julio with an exit right now. And in Superflex, I think that's going to be essentially impossible. But if he's elite still and it's October, maybe that's possible. Maybe that's possible with a contender trade. But I just think, and I love picks, but I think Julio Jones is worth more than these picks. And again, Hilton, I think, is more roster clogger than anything else.
Yeah, I'm with you.
All right, now we're going to flip it. We're getting Julio plus for somebody. Okay. So this is FFPC Superflex. So you've got a little more, So you got a little more roster size, but still pretty shallow. Julio Jones and a 22 first for Juju Smith-Schuster.
A 22 first?
Correct.
So this is a really interesting one. So
this is a two-way go, Jordan. Are you going to take the bait? This is a two-way go.
Yeah, so it is definitely a two-way go, and so this is a really interesting strategy because I actually love the construction of this, because if you're getting the first, right, give me a player that's also productive, so that's not on the roster that's producing the first, right? So that caps a little bit of that pick upside in terms of it being a championship contender. If you don't have Julio, like maybe you don't quite have that ceiling. So I do like that. Oh man, I think Julio is really interesting because you can pitch to me that on one hand he's Robert Woods, and on the other hand you could pitch to me that he's Jordan Matthews, and I think you could present cases for both of them. And I don't think either one of them is unreasonable. I'll just say, in terms of, I think the pro case for Juju is that Roethlisberger's been cooked for a while now, and they're basically trying to use him like a running back in the passing game, right? That's I think the pro Juju side of this. But when you look at his stats, they have been in decline for the past 3 years in terms of all the efficiency stuff, right? So there is question there. I do think it's an interesting two-way go, and I'd probably take the two-way go side. If this was post-free agency and we saw how the NFL reacted, I think that would be a different story. But right now, I'd probably take the pick in Julio right now.
Yeah, what I think is interesting is if you go into this with the premise of Julio outscores Smith-Schuster this next year, then you feel good about the trade probably on the Julio side, right?
Yeah.
So if I won it in the 1 year spectrum, and now I have a first to say, all right, Julio is now officially eroding. Maybe he goes down Larry Fitzgerald kind of a path, or I'm thinking like the last couple of years of Demaryius Thomas, where he was sort of aggregating targets, but it wasn't not the same upside, that type of stuff. You might get into that zone where he still might be usable for you, but now you've got the pick. And who knows if that ends up being high or low. But the point is, in Superflex, that expands how that pick, worst case, looks on the good end. So and Juju Smith-Schuster, the competition for targets, you would imagine it's a thinner depth chart wherever he goes, right? And I would imagine he gets paid relatively well. meaning he's going to get paid number one or at worst like 1B type money. And that's going to at least insulate him for a couple of years. And we'll kind of find out, how good he is, right? Or how much he can dominate, as you said, getting away from the Karkai of Ben Roethlisberger to some degree. So
right. I'll just say the cautionary thing with him is when you change teams, you tend to see a drop in production.
Year one, especially. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if it's going to be tough for him to do that, I think, in terms of a lot of the efficiency stuff. I don't know, if you pump 120 targets at him, he's going to probably outproduce what he produced with Ben. But that does come into play a little bit. Honestly, like if you look around at some of the places that you project to have quarterback or wide receiver openings, and a lot of them look like better quarterbacks. So, I think he could land in a better situation. Again, there's all of that uncertainty, right? There's a ton of uncertainty there. So when I sort of face that debate, give me things that I think are more certain, right? And when you start looking at things like that pick looks okay, that having that pick, at least we sort of have a range of what we think that could be. And we sort of know what Julio is, right? That's kind of how I would go through analyzing that. If you wanted to take the Juju side, I wouldn't have a problem with it, but that's just how my, showing my work, that's how it comes out.
Yeah. I think on face value, it's relatively fair. Just because I think that pick is like insulated, especially in the shallow FFPC, you don't have it taking up a roster spot. And I think the real key is if you get, again, top 15 level Julio, which you've basically gotten every single year of his career, next year, I think you're probably going to like that side. When we get all the way to 2022, the pick is coming due. And if Julio has that type of year, unless he walks away, he's still going to be on the landscape to be an auto start player for you the following year. So I just think you have two outs there, and we could still get 18 months from now, and the pick is the most valuable thing. So I just think that gives you some leverage, even though I think Juju will see. I mean, but again, his profile, where if you want to turn your nose up at Juju, we're talking about a guy that has been top 24 3 years. He's got upside, and yet we haven't seen it for a couple of years now. But we're talking about someone that's historically young, entering free agency with that profile, getting away from that depth chart and that quarterback. So this could obviously, look a little silly going that way as well. And if that first turns late, if it was a pick connected there. Right. All right, we got one more Juju trade, and this is another one. We're kind of flipping it where now Juju is on the package side. We've got Smith-Schuster, stock 12 team here, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and 203 for Mr. coming back from injury, Saquon Barkley.
That's interesting. That's really interesting because this opens up a whole debate of talk about a player that you have some uncertainty about, right? In terms of Saquon, right? We saw him be really good 24 months ago, and it has not gone well the past couple of years. So of all the players in this trade, is he the highest outcome? Yes. Is he the person that could shift the league for you? Yes. Is he the person that could win 2 warp for you? Yes. If this was a different receiver other than Juju, I might have more interest, but I think that Saquon's the best player in this deal. And this probably, he's probably the best combination of safety and upside. I tend to find the Clyde Edwards-Helaire profile to be pretty valuable. It's the Jacobs 1 year. We talked about the Jacobs profile. It's 1 year younger than Jacobs, and it's the same profile, right? And when you get a guy, even in the top 2 rounds, if you want to say, hey, he didn't deserve to be a first round guy, like when you look at those top 2 rounds and they hit as rookies, like that's really dense. And so when we're looking at Saquon, there's a lot of questions there. I would take Saquon here, but I don't think it's necessarily unreasonable if you tinkered with this a little bit and maybe gave me a different piece other than Juju, right? If it was DJ Moore, or if it was someone just else in the same sort of sphere that I felt a little bit stronger about, I could tend to go the other way.
Okay. Yeah, I think if there's a side that looks silly, it's probably the selling Barkley side. And part of it, I think you're kind of moving into a new strata of what that prospect looks like this year for it not being super flex. I think that's another part of it. So that's a little bit of a movement. And I do agree with you, like sort of the upside, like Could there be the perfect storm of Edwards-Helaire? Yes. I mean, if he puts up, again, I mean, if he gets close to what Barkley does, let's say, of sort of maybe a mid running back one or something like that, then obviously you're getting other components for essentially free, and you are getting a younger player. And like you said, just the out of sight, out of mind factor with Barkley. However, I mean, it's hard to shake the, Barkley, like if you're going to doubt someone coming back from an injury and being as good or better than before, I mean, he's not the one to doubt, basically. Right. So know that it's not going to be like a Mikel Lashore. I'm just thinking back where it just like, it never, like you saw someone come back and just not really the same. And there could have been other facets at play there. And so to me, you're getting three pieces. If that was like 105, then I think we're kind of talking a different discussion a little bit. Mm-hmm. But we aren't. And I just think, Juju has to be sort of like a top 10 sort of guy, or Edwards-Helaire has to turn into, and we've kind of already talked about him ad nauseum in the regular season. I mean, if he turns into a top 5-ish guy, then I mean, I think it's relatively easy age-wise. And, if the perfect storm happens, and you've kind of broken down why Kansas City probably isn't conducive to that. But if that were to occur, I mean, then you're just, you're throwing money off of boats, right? Like a la, what's that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio? You're just throwing them. He's like, this is fun money. So that, like, because if you get the perfect storm and all of a sudden, Edwards-Helaire is that guy that sort of we're saying, historically that hasn't been the case here, and it probably won't be. But if it were, I mean, you're talking about a 22, 23-year-old on Kansas City, just soaking up, a lot of meaningful touches that would be a dynasty game changer potential.
Yeah.
All right. Rapid fire, Jordan. We've got a few thoughts here and quotables, as I call it, from the Footballguys Dynasty Trades thread. Tight ends are the new kickers. What's your first reaction to
that? You got to play two tight end to force you to like more of them.
There you go. Logan Thomas isn't enough to matter even in tight end premium.
That's correct.
Wow. All right. We disagree. We'll bring him up on the tight end ranking section. And finally, referencing
he had like the worst year in terms of efficiency. He ran more routes than any tight end by not a close margin. And
he's a quarterback.
It was
you need to judge him against Brady and some of these other guys running routes at quarterback. He's a quarterback. All right. And referencing Dallas Goedert, this is his time with Ertz likely cut. So the end part is the important part.
I think Ertz is a cut. I do. I agree with that. You trust the quarterback situation there? I mean, right. I don't mention the guy's name, but do you trust the quarterback situation in Philly?
Is Ertz a buy based on that?
I'm not sure the market's caught up to him being a cut.
Okay.
And he kind of profiles to me as like being a wash. There's a really good Twitter account called "Has Zach Ertz Broken a Tackle?" And it's pretty amazing.
His movement. I mean, I said when Dallas Goedert was drafted, I was like, I think this guy's a better player. Now, it might not come through in targets and production and all this stuff for a while, but like, the Ertz was one of those classic overachiever types of like, wow, look at a centerpiece. All right. So I thought those were some good ones. Keep them coming in the Shark Pool there. You can find the Dynasty Trades thread, and always active if you want to find trades like these that we pulled from, as well as, again, the quotables. So in this episode, we talked Josh Jacobs. We talked a lot of Julio Jones, process of Dynasty Trades, Juju Smith-Schuster, a little bit of Saquon Barkley. And again, subscribe, rate, and review the Footballguys Dynasty shows, all the shows on the Audible through your listening apps. Sign up for that Footballguys daily email update at footballguys.com. And check us out next week. I'm Chad Parsons. He's Jordan McNamara. Enjoy the lead up to the Super Bowl, and good luck in your Dynasty leagues.